I've been thinking a little bit this week about a few verses in Genesis, the book of Genesis in the Bible, chapter 32. So I started the week quite wobbly, really, and it was surprising me, I suppose, in some ways, but also sometimes you have those moments, I suppose, in life where you feel that you're in a bit of a tussle, in a bit of a wrestling match. And this is the chapter really that came really to my attention this morning. I found it quite helpful. And in Genesis chapter 32, I'll start with verse 24. So Jacob was left alone. So he sent his family across the river, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have wrestled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. This is a really odd story, and I say that because I think Christians often think a lot about wrestling or fighting the enemy, the devil, and they feel they're in a spiritual battle, and there's a lot of that in the Bible for sure. There's also these kind of stories, and there are not so many of them, but there's this story and clearly the story about Jesus in Gethsemane, wrestling with his own will. That's a really interesting whole narrative about God and man, wrestling together. And this is exactly like that as well, isn't it? God and man wrestling together. It feels almost sacrilegious. It feels very intimate, very hands-on. Jacob was a name that meant grasper of the heel. It's the sort of person who would go for your ankle, try and pull you down. He's the sort of person you wouldn't want to get into a business contract with. He's the sort of person who was quite a slippery fish, really, wasn't he? And somebody who other people pulled one over on him as well. Laban, his uncle, who caught him up in a situation for 20 years. But Jacob is about to face his brother Esau. And really, to be honest, is another person he's deceived, another person who's tricked in life, somebody who's got clearly a bit of an axe to grind with him. And I don't know what it was like. Did Jacob suddenly attack this man? Did this man suddenly attack Jacob? It was dark. He was probably a little bit nervous. My wife suggested the fact that he was going off to see Esau quite soon. Maybe Esau sent somebody to jump on him, and he was by himself. None of his friends were around. Does God come up and jump on people? Does he pick a fight with you on a Saturday night? This is not the sort of Jesus that we're used to, is it really? I think what we recognise from this story is God wants Jacob to really face his own will, but in doing so, he's also going to weaken Jacob. And in doing so, Jacob's going to go after it and wrestle for a blessing. And I think he understands Jacob. But I think what's more poignant for some of us is he understands us. He understands the will. I think the will is a very strange thing, isn't it? I don't know about you. My will sometimes catches me unawares. My self-will. We say lack of willpower, but I think it's inevitably it's always the opposite, isn't it? It's willpower in the wrong direction. And God wants to wrestle with us. And maybe we need to wrestle with God. My prayer today is that we'll have some kind of punch up with God. I don't mean that in an irreverent way. What I mean is we need to have some kind of fight over some stuff in our life, because God wants to fight over it for us too, but only to weaken us so that he can bless us. Isn't that a strange thing? God wants to weaken us so he can bless us, because sometimes we're too strong to be blessed. We need to be humbled sometimes. When the police come to arrest people, there are times when someone realizes they're outnumbered or whatever. They go quietly. There are other times when they don't. I've seen them. People who are fighting like anything. Of course, all that happens is they might get a bit of attention and a little bit of a crowd, but they'll end up getting subdued. It just might be a bit longer and a lot more uncomfortable. And it's always good to pray, Lord, help me to give in. Don't let me fight with you any longer than I need to. I'd rather let you win, and I'd rather move more quickly towards being maybe slightly weakened, but definitely more blessed. Anyway, I hope that helps. Bless you.